Welcome, everybody, to Campus Chatter. I'm Jake Werther, alongside my co-host, Allie Overstreet. We got a lot of stuff talked about today. We got some great things to go over. We're going to talk about the NBA MVP race a little bit, update you on where those standings lie. Then we're going to switch gears a little bit to the NFL. We're going to talk about the arm wrestling scandal, and we're going to talk about Tony Romo's unexpected retirement.
We're also going to hit on the rivalry between the Royals and the Cardinals, talk about their season predictions, and then we're going to talk about how St. Louis turned down a soccer proposal recently.
And we're going to cover all this and more today on Campus Chatter.
You're listening to Campus Chatter, brought to you by the University of Central Missouri on UCM Radio, The Beat.
And we're going to talk a little bit first about the NBA MVP race. I know we've covered this a lot. Dale and Evan covered this last week as well. But there's just a lot to talk about here. It is such a close race, such a close contest. It's just hard to pick a clear winner, and you keep having to look at this and reevaluate it.
Yeah, the two top dogs they have is Russell Westbrook. He has his triple-double fury, and then you have James Harden with his explosive offensive numbers. And in my opinion, I think Harden, I know a couple weeks ago I was all Team Westbrook, but recently Harden's, I think he's going to come out on top. He has a combined total of points, rebounds, and assists per game that exceeds every MVP during the three-point era.
Okay, so I'm with you on this. I'm going to change my pick from last time around because we talked about this last time. I said Kawhi Leonard all the way. He should get it. He's the only one out of the four that can actually play defense. But I've changed my mind a little bit, too. And coming into this weekend, I still didn't really know what I was going to say for this segment. I looked around a little bit. I was watching some games. I still didn't have a clear answer. And then Westbrook's game Sunday against the Nuggets, that big 50-point game he had, just watching that, I was just in awe. I was like, you know what, this is what's got to be it. It's got to be Russell Westbrook. He's the one that, like I said, he's got the best average, the triple-doubles. He's passing Oscar Robinson. You put all that together, and then you just look at his game-by-game performance. It's just outstanding. It's what an MVP should look like.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. Westbrook is a phenomenal player, but the one thing that always strikes me as a little, offsetting is, he'll go up for that shot, he'll stop, turn around, go for that assist if he's down for those triple-double points. So that's just something that kind of, rubs me the wrong way, because I was full on board for Westbrook, but recently I think Harden's going to just kind of squeak by right there, because, Harden's going to come out on top, and then I think Westbrook's going to be a close second.
Okay, and that's been some criticisms of Westbrook, that he's trying to pad his stats, pad his assist. And, let's face it, at the end of the day, that offense is built to get Westbrook the ball. That's the way they run. And so, those are some criticisms, definitely. And like I said, I don't take nothing away from James Harden. He's having a tremendous season, and he should be recognized for how well he's playing. Obviously one of the best in the league. Just something that really, really aggravated me with Harden is this past week he came out and said that wins are the most important factor in the MVP race. And it infuriates me when athletes say that when talking about the MVP, because we have this conversation in multiple sports that wins are this number one category. And that it's so frustrating to hear from MVP candidate because the MVP is an individual award and wins are a team statistic. That should not be played into a individual award. Your wins are based around your team and the people around you. The MVP is just for one person, one individual.
Yeah, I know when he said, he thought it was the most important thing, winning he thought is what it's all about. And that comment honestly rubs me the wrong way too, because everybody wants to win, but like you said, it's about character. It's about how you play as an individual when games get tough. So at this point in time, I think it could be either Harden or Westbrook. But you also have to think, do you want to be a good player on a good team, or do you want to be a good player on an okay team? Because in that aspect, you have to do a little bit more. You have to work harder to try to actually get into that race for the MVP.
Okay, and Dale briefly touched on this last week, but if it's not the wins, what is it that makes an MVP? How do you define on a piece of paper what an MVP is?
I guess we talked about earlier, because I said, Harden has rebounds, points, and assists that exceeds every MVP during the three-point era, and then Westbrook's with his triple-doubles. So I guess those kind of things play an aspect. And then, me being who I am, like I said earlier, with character, I feel like that should also play a part, too, how you play. Because, if Westbrook's trying to just, like we said, pad his stats, looking for those assists whenever he's down, it kind of, takes away from the game, and you're kind of just oh, okay, you were looking for that big shot, but then he just kind of tricks you and turns around and dishes it back out.
Okay, so obviously the team built around the player has a little bit to do with that. You said, Westbrook kind of hogging it a little bit. And, just based on this team aspect, since 1985, only two MVPs that played on teams outside the top three in their conference won the MVP award. And right now, Russell Westbrook's team, isn't in the top three in their conference. Should that play an effect for his MVP candidacy?
Well, I think Harden also touched on that too in his interview, how like stats should play a key role, and like honestly, I don't really agree with that because I still feel like I said earlier, like being a good player on a good team or a good player on an okay team, because like MVP is most valued player, not most valued team. So whenever that player shines in like an okay team setting like that, that speaks volume.
You know, I think that's important for all of us to look at when we're looking at this MVP race and how it closes down, to look at more at the individual rather than the team. Okay, well, we're going to step away for a second. When we come back, we're going to talk about the NFL. We're going to get into this arm wrestling scandal we have. You know, there's some gambling issues, some legal issues there. Roger Goodell has a stance, the players have a stance. But we're going to get into that here in a little bit after this break, and we'll talk about what we think about the situation.
I choose red to blaze my own trail.
I choose red to be with students and faculty who make me feel at home.
I wanted a university with a big picture perspective. That's why I chose red.
Why do you choose red?
Choose red.
Choose red. Choose the University of Central Missouri. Choose red. Can I do that? Is that allowed?
Hey, Sarah.
Oh my God, she's so cute.
Been doing like I taught you. Love the new tattoo, Sarah.
Dude, that's Sarah. The girl in the pink shirt. That's the girl I was telling you about.
Theater 2 on your left. Hey, Sarah. What color underwear today?
Hey, Sarah. So when are you going to post something new?
Anything you post online, anyone can see. So think before you post.
Now we're going to switch gears a little bit. We're going from the NBA. We're going to talk about the NFL a little bit. You know, they've had some controversy with the Las Vegas arm wrestling competition, you know, and some gambling violations that might have went on there.
Yeah, apparently all the money that the champions won or are winning from this competition is going to charity. So that's kind of like a little like weird niche in the whole problem, because like with this, it goes against the gambling policy with the NFL, and there's a lot of rules that pertain to this. But like with the Raiders just switching to Los Angeles, this causes for like a lot of a rise of problems with it being like one of the #1 gambling cities.
Right, and so the big problem with this whole situation was, you know, there, like you said, there was this arm wrestling contest in Las Vegas, and there were 30 NFL players enter the contest. Among them was some big names like James Harrison, Kenny Stills, Marquette Kings, and there was this big $100,000 winning, which, you know, on paper seems like a little bad because NFL players, you know, shouldn't be in contests for monies like that. But like you said, it was for charity, and the NFL players all came out and said they would donate the winnings to their respective charities. So is this something that the NFL should be investigating?
Honestly, I think the players need to be held accountable for breaking the rules, because like that's what they did. Even though charities are involved, the athletes themselves, they have all this money that in general like they can give back to the community whenever they want to. So it just seems at this point in time, it just seems kind of like a joke, like especially with it being broadcasted on CBS.
Right, and I mean, I understand there may be some rule violation here, but this whole idea of the NFL blowing this up just aggravates me. This does not seem newsworthy. This does not seem suspension fine worthy. You know, the NFL these days, it seems like, you know, go home, beat up your wife, beat up your kids, but darn it, if you do drugs or you gamble, we're gonna get upset, and it's an aggravating situation.
I think what they're trying to do though is get a handle on it, because with it being in Las Vegas, like, you know, you have strip clubs, you have prostitution, you have the casinos, like the gambling, like you said. So like if they let this escalate, like who knows what's going to happen next. So they have to draw the line. They have to hold the players accountable, because, and honestly, they're breaking the rules and they're going to get fined. They're going to be able to pay it.
Okay, and I can see that argument a little bit, because the NFL is going to have to, you know, set a precedence, because they are moving into that Las Vegas market with the Raiders. You know, this situation is probably going to arise again, but it's just, like I said, it's a little frustrating. And I understand that NFL players are not supposed to do promotional things for casinos. They're not supposed to do promotional things for alcohol. You know, that makes sense. They're supposed to be these role model figures. But this wasn't them doing a promotion for a casino. This was them in a competition on ESPN that was arm wrestling. You know, this should be a fun thing for viewers to watch, to get to know the NFL players a little bit more. And it was for a good cause. It was for charity. I feel like this shouldn't be something that the NFL should look down upon.
I agree with that, but with one thing, honestly, I would be totally okay with this. I wouldn't think that this is just like, I think it's a joke, like you said, like it's funny, but like I think it would be better if it wasn't in a casino. I think that aspect of it kind of like that's where the rules get involved. Because, like, it's for charity. It's a funny arm wrestling thing with these big football boys, men. Like, if it wasn't in a casino, maybe I could see it being a little bit more, like, just kind of easygoing and fun. Like, maybe if they actually did it at, like, one of, like, the safe houses or, like, charities that, like, they sponsor, like, that would be pretty cool. Like, the kids would love to see that. But I think since it was at a casino, that's where, like, the NFL is having a hard time with this.
And I understand that because, like I said, the NFL is very, very against players staying up for casinos or alcohol or anything of that sort. But it had nothing to do with the casino, though. The only thing that the casino did, it was just at the casino. Like, there's no rule saying an NFL player can't be on TV at a casino. They weren't gambling. They weren't throwing money at slot machines or on card tables or doing anything sketchy or illegal. It was just the competition was just hosted at that venue. That's the only thing the casino served as was a venue.
Yeah, but money was involved. And I know it's going to charities, but still, it's at the casino. People are seeing that. There's alcohol. There's half-naked girls in there. Like, that's not something that the NFL wants on them. And like I said, like, it'll escalate. Like, the strip clubs, prostitution, like, drugs. Like, that's not as bad as, like, what, like you said earlier, like, with, like, assault and, like, rape. But, like, still, like, where does, like, the line draw? And I think you need to hold these players accountable. Like, they set an example and they're role models for other people. So if other people see that, it kind of just, like, puts a bad name for the teams.
And that is something that the NFL does, emphasize and set precedents for is, their players being role models. And that's why a lot of these rules are in place. That's something they're definitely going to have to look at breaking into this Las Vegas market. Well, we're going to step aside for a second. When we come back, we're going to talk some more NFL. This time, Tony Romo, his unexpected retirement and how it affects the NFL.
I grew up in a small American farming town. Didn't have a lot. I lived with 7 siblings in a single wide trailer. I just felt like, why couldn't life be better for me? I remember to this day, I turned on the TV and saw Les Mis on Great Performances. The music was so powerful. I believed that I can do that. It truly inspired me. Today I have a full-time career, but I also have a dream, to sing in a prestigious opera company. It takes work, time, dedication. Sharing my love for music with people gives me joy. PBS helped me think anything's possible. Now I really know what I want in life, and that's singing. PBS gave me the confidence to take a chance on myself.
So last time we were on the air, we talked about Tony Romo and possible landing destinations for him, what team he should play for. Not really the situation right now.
Yeah, exactly. He recently retired and went off the market, so both the Denver and Houston are kind of sad right about now.
Right, it puts those teams that are in that Tony Romo market kind of in a tough place. They're going to have to look at free agency. They're going to have to look at the draft a little bit. We'll talk about that here in a second. But let's talk about this Tony Romo transition. He retired to sign this deal with CBS to be a sports broadcaster. We see this a lot in sports when, big sports names step out of their sport to become a broadcaster. What do you think this does for Tony Romo, switching this kind of career field?
Well, I think he has a really great opportunity here because, like we said, they always look for the retired players to be the play-by-play or color analysis. But he actually had an interview earlier in the week talking about how, I'm not quite sure what the exact words were, but he talked about never giving up. So there's been a lot of speculation if this actually isn't the end, like if he's actually going to come back and play, because he said he'll never actually truly be done playing. So I feel like this will kind of be just kind of like a little fun time for him, and then I could see him coming back.
You know what? And that's an interesting point because Tony Romo said he doesn't want to use the word retired. He said he's 99% done with football. So there is that chance that he comes back, and we're seeing that a little more in the NFL where players retire and they're like, oh, never mind, I want to come back. We've mostly recently seen this with Marshawn Lynch a little bit. He's talking about coming back. So, we've seen this kind of indecisiveness with NFL players, this official, unofficial retirement. And, that's kind of frustrating to see in the NFL. When I see a player step down from his big role, I want a big emotional send-off, but I don't want to see him back. I feel like that damages the reputation of that quarterback, the legacy of him.
Exactly, and especially because Romo recently announced that his top pick was going to be Houston. So I feel like a lot of people over there are kind of sad about this. So, I mean, if he does come back, like, does that still play a factor? Is that where he'll go possibly if he does come back if he does come out of retirement?
Right, it's kind of a weird tease because the Texans right now, their upper management, general manager can't even look at Tony Romo as an option anymore. They got to look at this quarterback pool. They might have to look at Colin Kaepernick, Jay Cutler, some of those veterans out there that are still free agents. They might have to go to like a backup quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo, the Patriots want to move him. They want an arm and a leg for him, but they're willing to move him. So matter of maybe how much the Texans want to give up, or maybe they want to look at the draft a little bit. There's some possibilities in the draft. You have Trubisky there. That's the big name that's been sticking out. Maybe they could grab him if the Browns, for some reason, pass on him with their second pick in the draft. But there's just a lot of possibilities and a lot of questions. And, will Tony Romo really stay retired? And should he stay retired? Is it okay for him to come back into the game after, stepping away?
Well, I agree with you. Like you said earlier, it is kind of like a teaser whenever they do come back into the situation because, like you said, the send-off, it's kind of like you're done. You kind of hit that point in time. But I'd like to see what he does with this new broadcasting thing. But right now, as for Denver and Houston, honestly, they're not in bad situations. Like, they could trade up because at this point in time, like, the draft is loaded and it has a lot of raw arm talent like, going on right now. So they could get anyone they wanted, like Ryan Fitzpatrick or Blaine Gabbert, Colin Kaepernick. A lot of those would be good candidates for them.
Right, like I said, some veteran QBs sitting out there in free agency. Denver's got a lower pick in the draft. I don't see them reaching out in the draft taking a quarterback. I see them sticking with Simeon and Paxton Lynch. Now, obviously, it's not might not be a long-term quarterback resolution for that, but I think that's definitely a direction they can head. But with this Tony Romo situation, him stepping down, moving to the broadcast world, do you think he can succeed being a broadcaster? Do you think that transition from player to broadcaster is possible?
Oh, absolutely, because he has all the insight. He's been on the field. Like, he knows every aspect. He knows, like, all the ins and outs of the game. Like, he'll be able to give phenomenal insight not only to, like, well-known, educated fans, but to the fans that aren't really sure what's going on, like, just kind of, like, tuning in for the first time. He'll be able to tell, like, give more to the story, make it more colorful.
And we see that a lot. Some of the best analysts are those who know the game a lot. But, we also see players become analysts. They don't have that good dialect. They can't communicate well. They have the knowledge, just not the ability to communicate that knowledge. So, so that's definitely something we should look for in Tony Romo, making this transition. Can he do it successfully? Well, we're going to step away from a break. When we come back, we're going to switch gears again. We're going to talk about some Royals and Cardinals. So we'll talk about that when we're back on Campus Chatter.
Growing up, my family had no real idea of where we came from. It's kind of like being in a fog because you feel like a piece of you is missing. What is the rest of my story? I saw African American Lives on PBS. I love the series, and there was a DNA kit that you could order to find out your African ancestry. And so I really got excited. My DNA results said that I was from Ghana. Wow. It just really opened me up to a whole new world, so I went ahead and started doing things. Now my mission is to write stories to have something to pass down to the next generation. It's important to know where you're from and to tell your children, teach them that. PBS helped me to go on a journey to discover who I was, and that journey will never end.
So we're going to talk about the MLB here a little bit. Warrensburg's kind of a fun place to be because you get a mix of St. Louis natives and Kansas City natives. You get those hardcore Cardinal fans and those hardcore Royals fans. But you also have this big third population, this central Missouri that's not really affiliated with either city. They can go one way or the other. So for those people, they kind of get the luxury of picking which team they're going to follow for the season, the Cardinals or the Royals. And for all those Central Missouri fans, we're kind of going to take a look and tell you what team you should bandwagon with this season. What team you should really look at.
Well, I guess it all really depends where you're from, too. Like everybody from St. Louis Cardinals, everybody from Kansas City Royals, and we have an evenly distribution throughout this campus. And, right now, for this season, all the Cardinals really need to do is stay healthy. Keep continuing playing the game that they know. And then the Royals staff, I feel like the pitching staff is going to really struggle this year, especially because a lot of contracts are going to be ending and they're going to have some free agents out there.
Right. There's definitely, it's got to be a big season for the Royals. It's got to be a big offseason for the Royals, too. You're right. They got a lot of contracts to sign. People free agent at the end of the season, Hosmer, Kane, Moustakas, Escobar, Vagras. There's a lot of, big names on this team that are going to go up for agency, and they're going to have to make some work in this offseason. But looking at the season itself, both teams kind of coming out to a slow start. Cardinals 2-6, Royals 2-5 as of right now when we're filming this show. So, there's definitely some problems there. And a problem really to look at on both teams is the bullpen. The Cardinals and Royals both have the worst bullpen ERA in the MLB right now. They're the last two. The Cardinals with the bullpen ERA of 8.14, and the Royals just below 8. They've had a lot of problems with their closers, with their relievers. SDL specifically, O's got a 12 ERA, Cecil 15, Broxton 17. They're having trouble, closing these games out.
But I think the Cardinals have a lot more to prove because especially with their playoff contenders like being throughout the Central Division, so they have a lot more to show, especially with the Royals. Each of those players are individually, it depends if they want to stay or not, too. They're individually focusing on their own game because they have a lot to prove this season.
Right, they do. And, they both have tough divisions, the Royals and the Cardinals. There's a World Series contender in both divisions that they're going to have to play several series against this season.
Yeah, the Royals have to try to win to hold on, and they won't be able to pay the price of the expiring contracts if they need to salvage what they can. Right,
exactly. We were kind of talking about that, being an all-in season for the Royals. Like we said, those big names going up. The Cardinals just kind of had this recently. They spent, $250 million, in the offseason to now. They signed some contracts, Cecil, Dexter Fowler, Martinez, Piscotty, Molina, some big-name guys, and they locked those guys down through 2020, 2021. And like we said, that's something that the Royals definitely need to look at, this season, this offseason. Who's worth that money, where those contracts need to be. Because like we said, some big-name players here for the Royals that, contracts are going to expire at the end of the season. And, they're it's just going to have to be something they look at. Because when you go through the season, they're both kind of in a tough division. So it's something they're going to have to look at as far as, spending contracts and where they're going to put that money. Or we're going to step away. We're going to talk about St. Louis a little bit more. We're going to talk about the recent MLS proposal and how that's been going in the city of St. Louis. We'll be right back after the break.
Live with a human for a while and you get to know a few things. Like, I know she's actually not a morning person. I know she does strange tricks for no treats. I know that water makes her howl like crazy. I even know how the floor stays so clean. She's quick. But the one thing I will never for the life of me know is how she gets so tiny and inside that box. Natalie, how do you get so tiny?
I choose red for unlimited possibilities.
I choose red because my family is less than an hour away, but I still get to be independent.
I get to apply my classroom experience to my everyday life. That's why I chose red.
Okay, that'll work.
Why do you choose red?
Choose red.
Choose red.
Choose the University of Central Missouri.
Choose red. Kidding, that was a joke.
So we were just talking about STL and the MLB. Let's talk about St. Louis and the MLS. There's been some recent talks of St. Louis getting an MLS team. That's kind of hit a roadblock lately.
Yeah, but it looks like St. Louis will remain a two-sports city after voters defeated a measure that would have helped pay for a stadium as part of an effort to lure a Major League Soccer franchise. But they declined it, and it's not going to be happening.
Right, the MLS was going to put that expansion team in St. Louis. St. Louis, was their number one prospect for that expansion team. They wanted a little help for the city to build that stadium. The city, voted and wouldn't put up the money. So it's likely the MLS is going to be like, oh, well, we'll go to Cincinnati or San Diego. They don't want to deal with that if they're not going to get help with the stadium. So it looks like this deal is falling apart. Do you think that St. Louis could have supported a soccer team? Do you think it would have been a good thing for the city?
I honestly, being a sports fan, I wholeheartedly think St. Louis could have supported it because we have the Cardinals, we have the Blues, and that fan base is phenomenal. And just think about the revenue that another franchise would have brought in, especially at the old football stadium. I think they would have had a lot of opportunity here. But city voters, they went ahead and they turned down Proposal 2 yesterday by a 53% to a 47% vote.
And, as a St. Louis sports fan, I definitely want another team. I'm excited for another franchise. The Rams kind of left a hole in St. Louis. And, I'd be excited to have another team to root for. And this is going to sound like sports heresy, and I'm sure St. Louis doesn't want to hear this, but I'm glad it didn't go through. I don't think it was right for St. Louis. The MLS wanted $60 million in taxpayer dollars to pay for the stadium. Now, that doesn't sound like a whole lot, but I want you to find a map, take a string, and draw a 30-mile radius around where the stadium would have been. Then in that 30-mile radius, tell me how many school districts are unaccredited. That $60 million could have had a better use. Like I said, I love sports, and I want a franchise as much as the next guy. But that was a lot of money the city of St. Louis can't afford to put up for a soccer stadium. And then there's another question about, is St. Louis a soccer market? You know, I had somebody come up to me the other day and say, St. Louis is a soccer city. And I said, I think you mispronounced the word baseball. And I understand that when the Premier League comes, they sell out Busch Stadium. I understand that. That's, 50-something thousand people they packed in a stadium to watch soccer. That's Premier League soccer, though, not the MLS. That's two different stories. That's like saying the NBA and European basketball, those are not the same leagues. The Premier League and the MLS are not the same leagues. So I'm questionable whether St. Louis could support a team like that.
Honestly, I'd have to disagree with you. And, I'm not the biggest soccer fan. I would have honestly loved to see St. Louis acquire an NBA team. I feel like that would have flourished so well. We would have brought in money from parking, from shopping, from food, from hotels, because people would come all over to watch that. You know they would. Something as big as NBA, because, honestly, soccer isn't something that is big in Missouri. Not a lot of people are, into that, in my opinion. And I think basketball would have been a great attribute to that, because, it would have cost tax dollars, but just think how much of that goes back after you get all that revenue in from the actual games.
And I think that was kind of the thought behind the soccer team, too, is that, we've put up $60 million, but we'll get a lot back. But I don't think that would have compensated for each other. And I like your point with the NBA. I've heard a lot in St. Louis about, we should get an NBA team. And I think we as St. Louis citizens just think that, if we lose a franchise, sports leagues should be like, we'll just throw you an expansion team. That's a really easy process. We'll just put an expansion team in our league. It doesn't really work like that. There's a lot of, thought that goes into it, a lot of restructuring of leagues. And this was an opportunity for St. Louis, and it shot it down. So what does that really say for the future of St. Louis, getting a franchise from another sports league, getting that third franchise for the city?
Well, the MLS did. They expressed strong interest, and then the voters put it down. So the one thing that is really discouraging is the league is expected to award 2 expansion franchises this fall, but both of which would begin play in 2020.
Right, and that's not a feasible timeline for St. Louis, especially with this getting shot down. Like I said, they'll likely go to Cincinnati or San Diego, and San Diego's kind of similar to St. Louis. They just had their football team leave. There's a little bit of a gap there. That would be a great place for an MLS team. But it's probably gonna come down to a similar situation in St. Louis. Is the city going to be willing to put up the money for the stadium? Because there's the great idea to have an extra franchise, but you have to have a place for them to play. You have to have a stadium.
Exactly. And not many people agree with me, but I still have this lingering feeling that the Rams still could come back, because they're always moving all over the place all the time. So there's that little hope in the back of my head that we'll see them back. But honestly, I think St. Louis will remain a 2-sport town. I'd love to see another one come in. I think the money would flourish and come in. You could get so much revenue in, but I just think the taxpayers are just not going to budge on this one whatsoever.
No, and the city of St. Louis, struggles financially a little bit already. At least distributing taxpayer dollars. Like I mentioned earlier, the school system's kind of lacking. There are places where that tax dollar needed. So I can come agreement to that. I know we disagree on the fact that MLS teams should come or not, but I can agree on the fact that it will probably remain a 2-sport city for the foreseeable future. And I mean, that's not necessarily a problem though, because the 2 fan bases for those 2 sports are really strong fan bases. The Cardinals and the Blues fan bases, both incredibly loyal in packed stadiums.
Yeah, exactly. People come from all over, and like I said earlier, you got those hotel fees, you got that parking, you have all these contributions that tie into this, and it makes it such a strong fan base, especially with St. Louis just having those 2 teams, so you don't have a lot to choose from. You have them, and you can be dedicated to both of those teams. Right,
because it's not a lack of, a poor fan base, St. Louis just isn't a sports city or anything. It's not the case. You can look at the Cardinals and the Blues. Like you said, they pack stadiums, they fill up hotels, it adds all this business to restaurants. So it's not a matter of the fan base or, poor sports. It's just a matter of that money, and that just wasn't there this time. So, it might be another 10, another 15 years before we get a third franchise. But, if that's the case, that's the case. There's no reason, to, bankrupt a city over it. So that's something, we should definitely look for in the future. But for right now, just be too satisfied with the 2 good teams we have, because they are good franchises. Well, we're going to wrap up a little bit today. We want to thank you for listening in and tuning in, from myself and Allie, from our producers back there, Lindsay and Allie, and from our instructor, Joe Moore. If you have any ideas for future show ideas, please contact him at jhmoore@ucmo.edu. And thanks for listening today. We'll catch you next time on Campus Chatter.
You're listening to Campus Chatter, brought to you by the University of Central Missouri on UCM Radio, The Beat.